You know, if you don't, then obviously you are in fact an academic, but at some point, if you want another grant, somebody's going to have to make money out of something you do. That may be far down the road, I'm looking at Russ, or it may be more immediate, but we're going to hear from some folks today who are making that happen. Our first speaker is Stephen King, and Stephen and I were just chatting. Stephen's based out of Calgary, but works a lot with his colleagues in Boston. That means he's getting a lot of frequent flyer points going back and forth. I guess in a perfect world we would not have to travel at all, but that's not the case yet. Stephen's had a storied career in the tax and accounting software space. He co-founded Greenpoint Software in 1995 and helped create the profile tax preparation software suite. It was acquired by Intuit in 2000, and I think we all know what happens when stuff gets acquired by Intuit. It goes on to have huge market success. He's also more recently been CEO of Mug for Hire, and I know that I've come across the Mug for Hire folks over at the Alistair Ross Centre in Calgary. He's going to do a little bit of an intro slide that's going to tell you about him better than I can, having met Stephen, you know, not too long ago. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that. Yep, we're old friends. So, without further ado, Stephen, take it away.
All right, thank you, Robin. And thank you, everyone. I must say, this conference has been really appreciated sharing the time with you guys. Lots of smart people in the room. I've learned a lot, and I'm very inspired walking away from this conference, so thank you very much for that. I'm very excited about the topic today, making money with big data, because it's what I've been doing for my whole career, which is about 30 years thus far. And, but some context, I'm not that Stephen King. I like to say I am a Stephen King, not the Stephen King, although my mother might differ. As Robin mentioned, we've got, I co-founded a company in 1995 called Greenpoint Software. We sold to Intuit in 2000. And unlike a lot of founder stories, I actually stayed with Intuit for 7 years. I ended up becoming the Chief Marketing Officer for Intuit Canada, and I was also a director of the US base in Mountain View, and I was a director of strategy, and I did some online community strategy for them as well, QuickBooksGroup.com and TurboTax Online. So I left there in 2007, took some time off, and I live in Calgary, and I looked around the technology landscape, and it was vibrant. There was lots of simmering companies, but what Alberta was 4 years ago in terms of technology landscape versus now, it wasn't quite as mature, and we're still on a journey here. But so along the bottom here are some of the associations that I'm involved with. I'm a co-founder of the A100. Who's heard of the A100 in the room? So a couple of people. Good. So the A100 is its namesake is the C100, which is Canadian expats down in California, helping to drive Canadian interests in Silicon Valley, Canadian company interests. The A100 is a group of second and third generation Alberta entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, guys like Brad Zumwalt from Veer, and Patrick Lohr from iStock Photo, Sean Abbott from Innovate Capital, Cameron Schuler, who's in the room. Cameron, he's in the A100 as well. And our whole point was, how can we contribute back into the local tech community to make startups hyper-successful on a global basis? And so we're now in our second year of operations, and we participate in a number of things. So really proud of that contribution that I've made to the local economy. So I kind of wear a lot of different hats. On the left-hand side, so since 2008, I've been running a consulting firm, technology firm, and I help a lot of different companies do any type of go-to-market initiatives. So things like pro forma forecasts, competitive research, pricing models, etc. I actually have a computer science degree, so I spent the first 15 years of my career programming. I like to say I've written 1 million lines of code, and up to 3 of them are comments. There you go. But I also have the other half, the branding and the marketing side. So Jadwin was talking about the beaker heads last night, and I think I'm actually the godfather of beaker heads. Yay, beakerheads.org. And the technology obviously brings itself to bear very much in the marketing world right now, because it's all very tightly tied to IT marketing and go-to-market. So that's what I do for some local companies, so mostly in Calgary and on the west coast of Vancouver. The other side of my hat is I'm CEO of TC Lab out of Boston. And in fact, Robin, interesting, we actually don't fly that much, surprisingly. We do more around Skype. There's a lot of online cloud tools that you can do to collaborate with colleagues and with your clients, etc. So it's actually a fascinating world. I spend more time probably in my little basement than I do on planes. But we've got a number of clients, and the whole idea is customer-centric, data-driven leadership. So it's really, TC Lab is about understanding what customers value, what's your value proposition, how you can make the most money based on what your customers want. So it's about creating your companies around the customer and doing so in a way that's data-driven. So every company that I've ever run into has the same problem. We've got 100 things that we need to do to be successful, but we only have resources for 13. So let's sit in a big room and then let's just muscle it through until we figure out which they are. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. What we do at TC Lab is we allow companies to focus on what those 13 things are by getting feedback from the customers and doing either key driver analysis or linkage analysis back to operational metrics to help companies do that. But we'll get into more of that in a second. Oh. I have a clicker. The big data landscape. A lot of these slides are very dense, by the way. Hopefully you'll use this as a resource after the conference is over. But when we talk about the 3 V's of big data, which is volume, variety, and velocity, those are characteristics of big data. And there's a lot of infrastructure companies that are handling that type of thing. So there's all the database technologies and architecture and whatnot. And in the upper right-hand corner, we've got analytics and business intelligence things. There's a lot of automated tools and a lot of companies doing some very interesting things in this space and trying to solve a lot of interesting problems. We put TC Lab in the upper left corner because we're applied science. So we're about applying customer loyalty science to big data, and in doing so, finding opportunities for companies. So that's kind of where we sit in the big data landscape. There's a whole bunch of disparate data sources in a company. This map changes depending on the type of company it is, but more or less this is a good core set. There's operational, there's financial, there's customer, there's social metrics, software use, adoption, employees, etc. And all of these sit in a lot of different places. Some are in the cloud, some are Excel spreadsheets. But the real trick to big data and getting gold at a big data is connecting these disparate pieces of data. Which is easier said than done, because most of this big data is garbage. It was Robin that said last night, he said, we've been focusing so much on this quantity thing, but it's really about quality. And it's about sifting through all this garbage to find out what nuggets of that data that you need to correlate to make sense of it. There is a lot of automated software that will troll through data and find trends, and those are viable tools. Trend analysis, I find, really helps you find low-hanging fruit in these type of business applications, low-hanging fruit. But for me, trends are for teenage girls and vampires. It's very, flavor of the month, and it's not going to last that long. So you can solve some problems that way, but in the end, you do need to have to apply human judgment to these things. So machine learning and automation gets you part of the way there, but you do have to apply your brain. This is a quote from the Harvard Business Review. Big data driven requires more qualified human judgment than cloud-enabled machine learning. So that's what we've organized TC Lab around. So our product, what we sell are a combination of products and services. We use our brains, but the whole idea is that we make money by organizing big data around the customer. We have 3 buckets of things we offer customers. The research and audit's very popular, especially the audit side, where we go into a company, look at the VOC programs, make recommendations on how they should organize that data. Inside the surveys, measurement, and driver analysis, those are typically for smaller companies, SaaS companies, guys that need to start their VOC campaigns and get some customer feedback. And then the linkage analysis, predictive analytics is the big scientific stuff. I should mention I have 2 partners in TC Lab. I have a big data architect that's out of Boston, and I have a PhD, Dr. Bob Hayes, out of Seattle. And so it's his science that we're using for a lot of this stuff, which we'll get into in a bit. In fact, in a bit is now. So how do you position yourself to have data-driven, customer-centric leadership? And it really is around customer measurements. And so we use a thing called Rapid Loyalty. This is a device that my buddy Dr. Bob put together. And Rapid stands for Retention, Advocacy, and Purchasing, which are measurements of loyalty behaviors. Anybody ever hear of NPS, or Net Promoter Score? there's a couple of people. It's from Fred Reichheld. And it's a fairly populist loyalty theory that gained a lot of speed in sort of 1990s, 2000s. And it's a single questionable recommendation. Would you recommend this how likely are you to recommend this to another person on a scale of 0 to 10? And that's a recommendation behavior. But there's 3 ways companies make money. So everything we do in a company, and I know there's variance to this because there are nonprofits and such, but everything we do in a company is about driving one of these ways to make money. And we make money 3 ways. A customer renews their stuff from us, we get new customers, or a customer buys more stuff from us, right? Hierarchy. And so the 3 loyalty measurements that we have completely mirror the 3 ways that companies make money. And in this way, we can start to form predictive analytics around what's going to happen to your company based on the loyalty measurements that we get from our customers. So, in the end, TC Lab, we combine big data and voice of customer metrics, apply predictive analytics to identify correlates of customer loyalty and sustained revenue growth. It's really about 2 things. How do you create brand fans, right? And then secondly, how do you optimize your ROI and getting focused on those 13 things that you really need to do to grow your business. This is a really dense slide, but it shows a lot. This is the journey of customer experience management that most companies will go through. You start down here where you're starting to establish some VOC practices, you're starting to get a single source of data, you're starting to establish NPS or rapid, single source of truth, and you can recognize trends and then root cause and driver analysis. So that's driver analysis and measurement and reporting. As we go up the food chain, and we add constituency voices, so voice of customer, voice of employee, voice of partner, and we start interlating that into those operational, those data silos that I showed you earlier, and you start linking that data together, then you get into a strong competitive advantage for your company. So, so trend analysis, again, is more reactive. Predictive analytics is about being proactive with your business, risk awareness, customer impact analysis. There's a number of things that you can solve with this forward-looking data through linkage analysis. So I'm going to show you examples of both of these, actually. I'm going to show you an example of driver analysis and something that we're doing in linkage analysis as well. The first case study that I have is from a company called Cashew. Anybody hear of Cashew before? No. Cashew is an online accounting package that's the #1 iPad-rated accounting app that's available on iTunes. And so they have customers all around the world. And as a SaaS company, we approach them with our product as the Customer Relationship Diagnostic, or the CRD, because they really had to understand some very specific things about their business. Now, this is a SaaS sales funnel. It's what I use in my consulting world for my SaaS companies. And the thing I love about the internet is that it's all a big mathematical model. It feels like it's all a bunch of behaviors and stuff. It's just math, and if you start doing the math and you build your business around this math, you can actually, tweak a few conversion rates here and there, and you know what's going to happen, what's going to fall at the bottom of your funnel. But let's have a look at it. On the top of the funnel, in the very top under awareness, we have the murky ooze of the internet, where people are going around and they might find your tweets and your blogs or whatever the case may be. That's the traffic that comes to your site, and that's usually through advocacy. It's usually through word of mouth, people telling other people. So what we get excited about in marketing is actually helping customers tell each other about the software. So in me, the world of marketing has really changed from I've made a product, let me tell you about it, to I've made a product, you guys discuss it, I'll give you the facility to do so. And that advocacy is really highlighted on inbound marketing, and that drives our website traffic. And from there, we get a series of conversion rates, engagement rates, trial rates, all the way down to we actually get some paid users. So once we have some paid users, that's great, but 2 things can happen, or 3 things can happen to paid users. Either they continue to pay us, which is great, they can leave us, churn, which is on this side here, or we can perhaps get more money out of them up that way. But the fact is, we still have 3 ways we make money, and we still have 3 ways that we can measure this. So our CRD survey product takes the customer loyalty dimensions and it maps it against other dimensions for your business. So things like customer service, things like product quality. We can get into marketing benefits, we can get into product dimensions. Really, whatever the company needs to find out, we can kind of go out and then correlate that on these two dimensions. What's the impact to the customer, and how are we doing on this dimension? And we, consultants love our 2x2 grids, don't we? In the upper left, in the red area, what we find are things that have high impact for the customers, but things that we're not that good at. And thus, those are the things that we need to improve. And hopefully, those are the 13 things that appear up in that category. In the upper right-hand corner, we have things that we're great at that also impact the customer greatly. And therefore, those become our marketing messages and our strengths of our product value proposition. In the yellow, these are things that we do well at, but may not have a big impact for the customers. Therefore, just kind of, just maintain those things. No need to overinvest in them. And in the white, it's things that customers don't care about, that we suck at, but no one cares, so let's just not even talk about them. So the data that we got back, we went out and for about a month, I guess a month and a half, we did this survey and reported results actually mid-September. And what we got back was actually quite surprising to the team. Now, I am letting a little bit of cat out of the bag. Every single software company has things that customers want them to produce. And in fact, the reporting area that Cashew has is actually pretty viable right now. But really, when we started digging into it, reports was highlighted as sort of the #1 thing that people wanted us to improve on. And then became the discussion, well, what does that mean? Let's dig into the verbatims and the text that was in the survey. So that was a little bit of a surprise to the team. And then the other one that was interesting was future product company direction. So when we looked at their social strategy, they were doing a lot of talking around, the top 7 tips for small businesses and things like more soft content, when in fact customers wanted actually a relationship with the company, a conversation about where they headed with the product, what's coming up next, what are they doing, and those types of things. So, so that was a good thing that we could solve with the marketing. Now this was just for the retention loyalty dimension. So this was for customers. If we want to get customers to stay with us, then those are the things they should focus on. We had different drivers for advocacy and purchasing loyalty. And we could also slice and dice this information against the people who are paying versus the people who are in trial, the people who are active, non-active, and dormant. This is a terrible problem in SaaS companies where you get people sign up and they use it for 10 days and then they don't use it for 3 months. And are they still users? Are they not? They're kind of still. So you want to figure those things out and figure out the drivers of those different dimensions. The usage, iPad, iPhone, Android, and web, we can slice the data that way, as well as the type of customer and business. So is there, do people running, photography shops, do they differ from people running retail shops? Typically, the answer to that one is no, but it's always in the data. That's what I love about this. You sit around the table, and there's always going to be someone, no, but what customers really need this? And you go, I don't think so, because we have 7% of your customer base, which is statistically viable, telling us that this is what it is. It's the data. It's the data. So that's it. And what I've seen in C-suites when you present this data is it stops that runaround conversation. It stops that rabbit holes. It stops those special projects and private things that people want to accomplish. And it really drives to the heart of matter, which is what the customer wants that will drive money for you. The other example that I have to show you today is some linkage analysis. We actually did a press release on Tuesday morning this week. It's kind of coincided with my talk up here. We've been fooling around with what's called HCAPS data. HCAPS data in the US for 2 or 3 months doing some analysis. So, and this drives us to our linkage analysis example. So what is linkage analysis? Unlike the driver analysis that we did, where we went out and we talked to customers about their intent on product dimensions and things, what linkage analysis is about is understanding that voice of customer as it relates to those silos of data that I showed you earlier, doing the linkage analysis. And it's pretty complex stuff. But ultimately, what we want to get to on predictive analytics is what is the dollar revenue value of improving customer loyalty? The HCAPS data, Hospital Consumer Assessment of Healthcare Providers and Systems. Who's familiar with this data set? You guys heard of this stuff? So in the U.S., great. So in the U.S., they've been running this for several years, where they're collecting. It's a standardized survey. They went out to 4,610 hospitals that receive Medicare, and they evaluate the patient experience. They gathered all this data for the purposes of actually saying to those hospitals, if you have a better patient experience, we will give you more money, and if you do lousy, then you will get get less. So it's a direct correlation to Medicare reimbursements. So obviously they're pretty inspired to do something with this data. The US CTO ended up putting these big data sets online. We cobbled them together, we did a bunch of research on it, and we made this interactive graph that shows all the hospitals and who's good and who's not. So that's interesting enough. We do have a free report available up there. There's the URL. And this interactive map is available here. So what we did is we correlated that with the Medicare spends. And what we found was a good patient experience does not start with Medicare spending. In fact, we saw all over the place that we had, hospitals that were performing adequately or on average or moderate or whatever, that were also had the highest spend per capita. So I did some digging around. I'm picking on these guys, Valley General Hospital in Monroe, Washington, and I went into their public financial statements, and they were actually losing $950,000 in 2010 on $47 million of gross revenue. And so this hospital is extremely interested in figuring out if medical spending is not related to patient satisfaction, then what is? And so the linkage analysis will bring those things together. And ultimately, it is about focusing time and dollars on the things that matter most to the patient experience, make the patient experience better, and increase their total Medicare reimbursement. 10 seconds left. These are our products and services in those 10 different categories. Our surveys are all about the different constituencies that I'm talking about, and then we tie it all together with either audits or linkage analysis. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephen. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take questions for all our presenters at the end, all in one go. And that was information flowing. That was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I like your picture of the dump truck with the garbage data. Though, as John Rennie was telling us last night, sometimes what we think is garbage turns out to be valuable later on. So you sometimes have to dig back through the dump. Our next presenter is Robert Offley, and I actually got to meet Robert this morning, so it's been a great day for me. I'm meeting lots of people. I can tell that Robert, by the accent, comes from somewhere not too far away from me, with a degree from University of Birmingham. So Robert has more than 18 years of management experience in the IT industry. And I'm taking my iPad.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not going to stop in the middle of a presentation much, but someone just takes my iPad away, and I get pretty possessive at that point. Robert started or joined CentralLogic as president and CEO in 2006, and prior to joining CentralLogic, he was president and CEO of FusePoint Managed Services, expanded the company out of Vancouver to become a national provider of managed services. And there's a number in here that really got my attention. I was looking over the quick bio. In the time he was with FusePoint, he grew the business to achieve sustained 170% year-over-year growth. That's pretty impressive. So I think with numbers like that, we're going to hear a good story about really how to make money with data. And I'll ask you to just take it away.
Thank you.
And Keely over there is your time.
Oh, okay. Where's that?
It's right here with the...
So I don't have the electric chair or anything, so you're not going to buzz me. Thank you. So thanks, Robin. Yeah, it's interesting to be here and listen to some of the other sessions. From my perspective, I'm going to come at this more from a cloud and the infrastructure side. Sometimes it's not the sexy part of this industry because you're talking about the nuts and bolts of delivering big data and managing and sifting through big data, but it's still a key part of the whole continuum of IT delivery and the new digital economy we're living in today. So I'm going to talk about some of the emerging trends and opportunities. I probably won't spend much time on that because I'm sure that a lot of presenters have talked about that over the last few days. Talk a bit about cloud and then get into, cloud computing. I mean, we deal with a lot of customers every day. Is it really the silver bullet? Are companies embracing it? Are companies not embracing it? Does it vary between the enterprise and the small to medium market? And I'm just going to talk about a couple of case studies just to give some real life examples of people who are starting to migrate into infrastructure as service and cloud. I have another quadrant. I think this comes from Infotech research, but if you're looking at the key impact that's going to be in the IT world and amongst CIOs across the world and Canada, it's really cloud and mobile which are having the highest impact and the most adoption. So it really is an interesting part, an interesting time to be in this market. I think it's probably, to me, it feels like an industrial revolution in terms of what's happening in the space we're all working in. There's other big spends as well, like security, but they're more defensive. I mean, as I'll get on to the next slide, as we get into more of the devices that are accessing the internet, really the ability to be able to manage security is something that there's spending going into, but it's really more of a defensive ploy. So the interesting thing about this slide is that the Windows PC used to account a few years ago for 90% of access to the internet. And boy, how hasn't that changed over the last couple of years? So there's about 5 billion Windows devices that access the internet, but the mobile has taken that over. And by 2020, we expect to be about 20 billion devices accessing the internet. So it changes the whole paradigm where people want support anywhere, they need to be able to access data anywhere, and this creates a lot of security and issues of compliance and global infrastructure. So the growth of our market. Software as a service is, a lot of our clients, we provide the infrastructure as a service for software as a service clients. So this is an area that's growing dramatically in terms of based applications. The compounded annual growth is 17%. But the big ones are coming from Office data suites, digital content creation, and business intelligence applications. I mean, business intelligence is really about, as Steve was talking about, sorting through this massive data and finding out what's really important and getting to the quality. So clearly, it's a growth market and one that where infrastructure is key to that. As we look at the cloud growth rates, cloud adoption, and this is in large enterprise. As you can see, right across the world, the cloud adoption in the next 3 years is going to grow dramatically. In most cases, it doubles. And this is from Tata Consulting Group. There's many other statistics out there. If you look at some statistics from 451 Group and others, they're actually seeing compounded annual growth of 70% in the cloud market space. So it's not something, I think a lot of people wonder whether it's a cloud that something's going to solve the world. And I got my personal views, and I can share some of our customer views on that, but clearly it's a growth area. It's something that's here to stay and something that's going to be valid in the enterprise. And I think there's lots of opportunities for companies around that whole ecosystem to make money from cloud-based services. So let's just examine cloud computing. Is it really the silver bullet? I think from a customer, the promise, I guess, it kind of sounds great. I mean, it's like, you can just get access to computing resources whenever you need it. It's elastic, it's utility-based. I can just pull it up whenever I want. And while a lot of that is true, I mean, you can put a credit card into Amazon or other services and get access to infrastructure. It also we can get quicker deployment. A lot of the customers we deal with, they use infrastructure from us just because their internal IT departments can't deliver infrastructure quick enough. It also reduces CapEx. No longer do people have to buy big enterprise SANs and storage solutions and computing resources. And we can move all applications to cloud seamlessly. I think while a lot of this is true, as we talk to our customers, there's still a lot of concerns. And the way the cloud has been built, it doesn't necessarily fit into the enterprise applications. I mean, Amazon's a good example, and the way they built their infrastructure is they have a very solid security storage platform with S3, but the compute resources are, they're almost planned not to be there. You build your applications across multiple cloud zones, and you almost expect for that data not to be there. As we've seen, there's a number of outages from people like Amazon. So I think what's going to happen in the market is going to be different types of cloud that are deployed. Security isn't an issue. Well, I think as we talk to a lot of corporates, I mean, it's probably the biggest thing we see in terms of security of their data. My data is sitting in a data center. I don't even know where that data center is. I don't know where. I don't know what the physical access to that data and the security in terms of firewalls that are securing that data. So if an enterprise is looking to outsource their IT and look for infrastructure, those elements are still very important. They still want to know where their data is. They want to know, is it going to be up and running? And so a lot of people have this concern about, is my cloud sitting in a basement in some small provider, and people have access to that. So it's still a key thing. The other misconception, I think, is cloud computing isn't always the cheaper alternative. I think cloud computing works very well in the utility model, where you can bring up computing resources on demand. But if that computing resource is there all the time, if you do the math, cloud computing isn't always the cheapest. It's cheaper to potentially have other infrastructure in place. And that's where we get into the next point. The cloud computing will replace co-location, managed and hosting services. I think what we're finding from a lot of customers is cloud definitely has a place in the continuum of an IT strategy, but it's not really the silver bullet. It's not, we're not finding from our customers that they're moving everything to the cloud. A typical customer from us will have co-location. They've already invested in a number of assets that they have, and they'll bring into our data center, and they may co-locate those. They don't want to throw that away overnight. And when I talk about managed, I'm talking about more permanent infrastructure, virtual private servers. A lot of our customers will bring those in, and they have some internet-facing applications where they're put on managed. And really, cloud is used right now more for the variable demand, for training, for QA, for other types of services. And by offering, and we call that continuum hybrid IT solutions, where we're providing an element of each, we give companies the opportunity to move across through the continuum, from co-location right through to cloud. Deploying cloud applications is easy. I think, again, as we talk to a lot of enterprises, the way they design their infrastructure is typically around a pretty large and intensive database. And that's difficult to put out into the cloud. To have the database, have compute resourcing for the database, it's disparate, it doesn't necessarily work. They're more designed as a hub and spoke, where you have a big database, lots of application servers. So a lot of applications won't easily move into the cloud. We're finding that they may, again, put their database in dedicated hardware, which is secure and separate, but they can use the cloud more for spinning up more application servers and more web servers to deal with demand. And that kind of plays into the next point about cloud solutions not requiring standalone hardware. So the other important thing is to recognize the different types of cloud, and there's different terms given to this, but if you go to an Amazon or a lot of the companies that Steve mentioned on his slide deck, public cloud, that's really public cloud. You're out there, you don't necessarily sit behind a firewall. In many cases you have to build one of your servers as a firewall in terms of protecting your data. And that's one type of cloud. I think another type is a private cloud, and a lot of people use private cloud to say for an enterprise building their own cloud, but from a service provider point of view, we also give the ability for companies to build a cloud behind their firewall, so they can connect their traditional co-located in their own servers into a cloud and use that for elasticity, so they can grow their applications into that. And then a hybrid is again a combination of the two. So there's different types of cloud, and I think as this market develops, there will be different focuses of infrastructure plays. Some of them will be focused more on the public cloud, which I think will be more akin to shared hosting, where security, performance, availability isn't important. And then there'll be continuum going through to more of an enterprise cloud where it's very secure. In terms of central logic approaches, we're building our cloud, and we're building a lot of elements in that kind of put it into more of the enterprise, what the enterprise expects. Having the ability to back up, having the ability to fail over servers, and to do that across geographical regions. And we operate data centers across 4 continents, so we can actually move VMs between hosting centers and do that fairly invisibly. So a couple of case studies just to consider. So first of these is a company called Cookie Jar. And does anyone have young kids 9 to 11? Lots of people in the room. So Cookie Jar actually owns the rights to a lot of the brands your kids would be watching, such as Arthur, Kaloo, and these types of brands. And they basically deal with all the production and distribution of that media. So actually the largest, outside of Disney and some of the others, they're the world's largest independent entertainment consumers product company. And they have about 6,000 TV episodes and You can go on their website, they have a ton of different brands, but that gives you an idea of some of them. Some of their challenges is that they are a worldwide company, so they have multiple infrastructure locations worldwide, creating not only security issues in terms of how their distributors and their customers can get onto their access their data, but also privacy. I mean, that's one thing we deal with a lot is, in the US, we're dealing with Patriot Act, and a lot of companies in the US like to host in Canada because the Patriot Act basically says anyone can come along and access your data without you necessarily knowing about it. There's also different privacy laws between PIPEDA in Canada and HIPAA in the US, and then there's European Safe Harbor in Europe. So a lot of these challenges are things that are real issues for companies, and it's also an opportunity for making money. They need server consolidation and really this multi-tenant platform so that they can have different access and authentication for internal, developer, and distributor access. But probably the biggest thing in terms of using the cloud, they wanted to have elasticity of infrastructure for acquisitions. They're a growth company, they're acquiring companies all over the world. So they want to walk in, acquire a company, and be able to turn up infrastructure very quickly. And maybe they acquire and they need to build a new CRM or a new customer acquisition system. They can do that very quickly. Being in the kids, they have very scalable MMOG games. They built some of their games for certain brands, and what they found is that they put the game out there and suddenly it goes viral, and they have to scale out their infrastructure tenfold very quickly. So the other key thing is, again, big data. They're dealing with suddenly HD formats and new formats in terms of how this content is distributed. So a lot of challenges in terms of, there's a lot of change in here. There's a lot of growth in data, and so I think cloud represents, on one hand, a very good opportunity to leverage and to fulfill these customer requirements. So, I think and again, this kind of plays into this kind of hybrid approach. For key applications and databases, actually, they deploy that more traditional. It's still managed, so they deployed standard, like a SAN with standard hardware and built a virtual infrastructure for the databases, but it was private, it was separate from any other customers. But they use the managed service and cloud for application and data-intensive applications. So they really use the cloud for their scalability. So if a game went crazy and went viral, they could turn up 20, 40 servers within an hour and satisfy that demand. They need an international footprint and a global content delivery. I mean, that's the other key thing, with this media, being able to not be able to deliver all the content from one central location, but rather distribute that across different continents. So they could, if they have someone accessing their website from the US, the content will come from the US, from Europe, and so on. So again, as you look at this customer, they are using the cloud, but they're only using it for the elasticity and the piece that where security and some of the compliance issues aren't quite as important. Another company, another software as a service provider, BPS Resolver, are a compliance company. They manage compliance for a lot of organizations, and they deliver a software platform to do that. So, again, how they make money is they save 25% with moving. They've actually moved all their infrastructure into the cloud. So this is actually an example of a company who migrated everything into the cloud. So again, they have North America, European, Asian customers, different data storage requirements for US and Canadian customers. There is a requirement for data not to cross geopolitical boundaries. So that's a key requirement of their customers. They wanted requirements for world-class data centers and physical security, so they weren't really necessarily interested in going to an Amazon or maybe another cloud provider where they couldn't actually go around the data center, kick the tires, and actually see, does this meet enterprise requirements and compliance, physical and other security requirements. They also were building a lot of their infrastructure on hardware, so they got a new customer, they had to go and buy a new piece of hardware, and that was a challenge, in terms of procurement and logistics. It could take 2 or 3 weeks for companies to get the infrastructure in place and start building those new customers. But really the cost effectiveness was a significant factor, and the cost savings, as I said, were 25%, and they're growing as they scale their infrastructure. That cost saving is growing. So they use our footprint, basically complete pay-as-you-use model. So they even have the ability within their application in the middle of the night, if they see demands, they have API calls that can call in and generate more infrastructure. So again, I cover most of the points on here because I'm looking at my time here. But essentially, this has been a huge saving and a huge benefit to them. So both companies, in terms of BPS Resolve and Cookie Jar, are using the cloud effectively, but I think, again, it's important to take time to review what you're trying to achieve with the cloud. So I think the key things that we've learned is, when we talk to companies, really is to create an inventory of your IT assets and applications. And look at those. I mean, categorize these key applications, how they're going to grow, do they need to be elastic, how important is security and availability. And really, as we come in, we see our role as being fairly consultative and working with our customers and help them match, okay, something needs to be very secure, very available, maybe that goes on dedicated infrastructure. But again, some of the more variable assets can go into more of an elastic environment. And I think we'll find today that, especially when we deal with mid and large enterprises, in most cases it involves some kind of hybrid approach. Even if it's a link back to their own infrastructure within their own company, they don't move everything to the cloud day one. They want to test it and they want to move through and test applications in the cloud. I think in doing all this, really our biggest proposition as we work with clients is we actually help them focus on higher value activities. You know, they're not focused on doing patch management and nuts and bolts of the infrastructure. You know, as we've already seen with big data, the requirement to do business analysis and to get smart about how you use your data is more what we see our clients wanting to do, which means they want someone else to offload the server management, the nuts and bolts of IT, as I've already mentioned, and focus on business analysis and applications. The other key thing about a hybrid approach, and I think it's important to understand the peaks and valleys and build accordingly, is, traditionally enterprises used just to build to the baseline, so they had to put dedicated capacity in place, or they had to build to the peak, so they had dedicated capacity and they had to have the unserved demand, because if they needed to turn more capacity up, it just took them too long to do it. They're pretty inefficient in terms of price, in terms of all the things we talk about in terms of efficiencies of data center spend, power, so that doesn't necessarily make sense. The other option is just to move to pure cloud, and that has its own challenges. It's not necessarily the cheapest. If you're just putting all your variable-based applications in the cloud and having them there permanently, it costs you more than having dedicated capacity typically. So the hybrid solution means that you can have some dedicated capacities for things that are known, where the usage models are known and predictable, and then you have the on-demand for pay-per-use. So I think this is an important point that we're finding with our customers. It gives the optimum cost and the optimum flexibility. As I said, just a bit about us. We're a company. We operate data centers across various continents, and again, essentially, we allow our companies to focus on activities which are closer to their core business. As a final point, because I have 29 seconds, is these are just some of the customers that we work with today who, all these customers are using us to make money with data, and we're providing the infrastructure so they can focus on activities which are closer to the core of their business. So, thank you.
Thanks very much, Robert. It's always good to actually see the numbers behind what's going on, so I think that really helped to sort of put some of this in context. Again, we're going to hold questions until all three speakers have presented. Our next speaker is Nathan Armstrong, and I've got a bio here, but you've all got the bio as well in your package. And I've known Nathan for a good deal longer than 10 minutes, so I'm just going to talk about Nathan for just a moment. Nathan is one of the coolest engineers I've ever met. I went over to talk to Nathan about what a small engineering shop looks like in Calgary, and I expected a small engineering shop, and sure enough, he didn't have an army of people working for him. But he's been working as a transport engineer for more than 17 years, as a transport design engineer, and he's been working in the space, in the electric vehicle sector, and I found the visit to his firm absolutely mind-blowing. The level of design, the scope of the projects was astonishing. So I'd encourage any of you who have a chance afterwards to have a chat with Nathan. He's a cool guy. I'm going to let him do the rest of his intro himself. Nathan.
Thank you, Robert. And what a great conference, eh? And I just want to give a special recognition to the IT go-go dancers last night.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to take a bit of more of an esoteric view on this making money with the cloud idea. Recently, I've been more involved with not-for-profit projects. Robin mentioned my previous life as an engineer and transportation designer. We had a lot of fun doing that. But we're trying to do bigger and better things now. And what I'm going to talk about today is the speed of collaboration that we're seeing in the not-for-profit sectors, but also in the business sectors. And hopefully I'll tell a good story here. So just real quick, I'm actually representing, I got a job for the first time in 8 years with a group called Enua Holdings. And they're a new company based in Calgary. It's privately funded. We're doing for-profit technology development and investment. We're also doing not-for-profit community building, which is a big part of my passion with the schools and creating a better world for everybody. So interesting group, and if everybody wants to talk about this afterwards, please come see me. We're having a lot of fun. So I was actually talking about creating money with data, but what I'd rather talk about is creating wealth with data. And money obviously isn't the end goal for any of us. Money is a tool. What we really want is wealth, value. We want wealth within our community. We want happy children. We want wealth for single moms. We want support for elders. We want all the better things in the world we're trying to build. So what I'm going to talk about is creating wealth with data. And what I'm going to use to do this is an example. And funny enough, as of last Thursday, I had no idea what I was going to talk about today. So an idea came to me, and I brought two friends together. And this is a great example of how quickly collaboration and wealth is being created through data. So I'm going to introduce to you two initiatives. The first one is called the First Light Initiative. And this is a good friend of mine, Rob Cardinal, who I'm involved with some space technology development work. And what he wants to do is put telescopes on a lot of the Aboriginal reserves in Canada to essentially inspire the youth, get them more interested in science and technology and all that kind of good stuff. So he's in an interesting position. He's raised some money. He's got a lot of attention to this initiative so far. I was surprised to find out that telescopes only cost about $10,000 for a 14-inch telescope. But his challenge is how do you connect them together? How do you actually get the bigger benefit from this infrastructure? And he really had no way to do that. So along comes the Picture Initiative, and this one was actually presented here last year. This is James Van Leeuwen. I don't think he's in the room today, but he's at the conference here. And essentially what this initiative is about building broadband connection for rural communities. You know, very much what was talked about Frederickson yesterday. Fantastic initiative, but really what is the end goal? We can build the infrastructure, but what is the end goal to use this infrastructure? So we actually had a meeting yesterday morning, and within about 15 minutes it was decided that this was going to happen. The two groups were going to come together, and we were going to connect the broadband infrastructure with the telescope project. Done. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And they joined each other's teams on a handshake, and off they go. They're off and running now. The Picture Initiative actually has Osley as a major supporter at the minute, which is the Oil Time Leadership Initiative. And they're doing it. They're building a broadband system in several communities right now, free Wi-Fi access to everybody, and they're doing really, really well. So again, both not-for-profit, but the result of this will be wealth generation within the Aboriginal communities, within rural communities, and that's really what we're after here. So this is the proposition. Bringing initiatives together to create networks, to advance knowledge and economic strength for rural and remote communities using broadband data centers and the cloud. And again, this is more of a not-for-profit standpoint I'm taking here, but the end result of this will be wealth. And economic benefit for essentially what is the biggest challenge that we face in Western Canada today, which is how do we engage in these rural communities? And how do we get these rural communities out of a cycle where they're dependent on logging or mining? And if that closes down, these communities fail. You know, they shrink and people move out and they fall apart. So how do we stop that from happening? That's really the goal here. And if we're successful in this, the results will be inspiration, which is what drives this planet. Very, very strong digital infrastructure. And where we're heading in Alberta is to essentially own our own infrastructure. This is something I think resonates well with the Western Canadian spirit, in that we want to control our own future here. So we're not using Amazon, Google. This is going to be our own infrastructure. And obviously cyber is a big part of that. The mentoring, again, is a big part of what we're doing. That we believe is a key part of this. How do we, again, get key people out to inspire communities and youth? And economic development. Obviously, that's where the money comes in. So, if there's a successful wealth will be created, and as a byproduct, money will be created. So, this is all kind of very obvious stuff, but I think the point I really wanted to make in this talk, and I've got plenty of time left here, is that we're seeing not only larger data grow at an exponential rate, we're seeing collaboration grow at an exponential rate. And we're seeing much more of an open attitude now towards intellectual property and towards businesses. And as collaboration increases at an exponential rate, communication is going to have to increase at an exponential rate. So not only is big data going to be analytics, not only is it going to be banking, et cetera, it's going to be communication and it's going to be collaboration. And that's really what we're seeing from our standpoint here. So that pretty much is the end of my talk. I'm going to be plenty of time for questions. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Nathan. So we have plenty of time for questions before lunch. We've got about 15 minutes or so, and then we can start thinking about heading up to Vistas for lunch. Questions for our panelists. Do we have everybody here? We got Robert, we got Nathan. Where does Kim go? Okay.
Where do you want me?
Why don't we get you guys up front, and we can set you up like a firing squad here.
Which will be me if no one has a question.
Oh, somebody will have a question. And Randy's going to take the mic up. First question from the audience. Okay, well, they're thinking up their questions. Oh, no, we got one. Side chest, SR Net.
Yeah, this is mainly for Nathan, because you captured my imagination. You said the biggest challenge is rural communities, but in Saskatchewan, our biggest challenge is engaging First Nations communities, youth, combined with rural communities. That telescope piece really captures me, and I'm wondering why we wouldn't think of using the research network infrastructure across the country to connect all these First Nations telescopes. Plus, we can connect to the big telescopes in Hawaii and Chile over the research network too, and really blow their minds. So,
we got a mic down here. Probably use the podium mic.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So grab the podium mic, or you're not going to get it too long. So James is actually in the audience, so in the same segment of it. But absolutely, this is the thing. How to best use the network we have now, which is largely underutilized. So the telescope thing, I think, is a perfect project to start pumping a lot of data into this network. And again, it's not profit-driven, it's science-driven. So absolutely, that's really what we're doing here. If you have any suggestions about how we would do this, please let's talk.
yeah, I already connect to the largest First Nation in Canada, which is the Laurage Indian Band, and they have a very progressive female chief, and I'm going to probably be talking to her next week about this.
Excellent. Well,
So I'll be in touch.
Fantastic.
Hi, this is James Menlon. The scope of opportunity here is immense, beyond just astronomy. citizen science and providing every youth in Canada, whether they're rural or urban, with the opportunity to participate in science as an everyday activity. That's one of the grand opportunities that we have. Science is fun. It's very engaging. It's very rewarding. It doesn't have the greatest reputation necessarily in some circles, but by means of this infrastructure and by means of initiatives like the ones that we're trying to really move forward here, we're hopeful, in fact, we're very confident that we can bring a new generation of engagement and opportunity and wealth creation right across Canada. And that's part of the objective here. The Picture Initiative is not quite as far down the road as Nathan was getting there. I'd sure like it to be. I'd like for it to be there. The client I'm working with right now is the Oil Sands Leadership Initiative, as Nathan mentioned, and their focus is on one First Nation community that they've been working with for a few years. So we've come up with a model for that community for network infrastructure that enables everybody in the community, but especially youth, to realize the full economic and social utility of all these devices, the smartphones, the tablets, laptops, and the whole range of other consumer devices that are out there. And that should be available to every single community. And the solution that we've recommended is a free Wi-Fi footprint. Picking up on the example that's been set by Fredericton, you know, why would you charge people to use your broadband, your Wi-Fi access? It's a sidewalk. It's a de facto public utility. Let's get over this whole thing, you know, and get on with what's actually going to work for people. So, yeah, we'd sure like to help move that forward.
I'm not sure that there was a question there, but thanks, James.
Clarification.
Okay. Any other question from, okay, behind you, Randy? Karen?
Hi there, Nathan. I'm new to your organization. Can you explain the role that Inua takes with those projects?
Kind of. Essentially with Inua, we're working with a zero structure company. The idea is that everyone's in their passion all the time and there's no boxes. So it's fairly liquid. So right now, from a financial standpoint, we're helping. From just a networking standpoint, we're helping. Like I said, it's a fairly new idea to bring this together. So hopefully from a legal standpoint, we can help as well. And I think what's really fascinating to me is that using the example in Olds, the broadband network they're building there is self-governed. And if we can continue that model where this infrastructure continues to be self-governed, we might be looking at an interesting sideline in the future that maybe will enable us to have more control over our destinies here. So it's, we'll see where it goes. You know, we're just giving them some moral support in a minute, but you know, yeah.
I'm going to jump in with a question of mine before the mic goes wherever it's going next. So, Stephen, you talked a lot about really getting some metrics around how companies are engaging their customers, how they're looking at the voice of customer and figuring out how those behaviors eventually translate into doing something that the company can do to make some money. We're hearing a lot of questions here. I think Nathan's idea of the telescopes on the First Nations reserves and so on has sparked a lot of interest in how demand can be driven to help people move towards science and so on. How does a company like yours sort of look at that and say, where's the opportunities and help people figure out how to actually make money from that ultimately, that so that we can sustain it?
From this kind of thing?
Sure.
Well, it seems to me there's probably a lot of advertising space on the side of the telescopes. Well, I was actually going to mention that one of the things that I love about what we do is at TC Lab, as well as with my consulting, is that we make companies better, we make people better, we make customers happier, and for that I get a lot of benefit out of that, just as an individual, knowing that I'm contributing back to the world. In fact, I like to call it altruistic capitalism. So we're doing good, but we can also figure out how to make money out of it. And I'm not sure everything fits into that mold. This is altruism at its best. We're going to hook up kids with telescopes and look at the stars, so that's all good stuff. I'm not even sure that needs to make any money. per se, but I bet you I could figure an angle at it. But I think it will all come back down to the usage and what happens after the fact. So that's as you enter that into your project. I would make sure that we would find out how it's being used, how frequent it's being used, and make sure that we can figure out how to iterate it, as opposed to just letting telescopes get dusty. That's where I would use data on an ongoing basis in that project.
Sure. Yeah, Robert, did you want to throw something in there?
All right.
It's a tough one when we're in a making money with data session and somebody just throws us off on an altruistic track, but...
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think I totally concur with the whole wealth, because I think sometimes you just think about money in its pure essence and the whole wealth of it. But I think one of the points you made, Nathan, was about having infrastructure that's available, and then there's something that can be available from companies like ourselves. I mean, at any one time, you can imagine, because we're always building for the peak, we have a bunch of infrastructure that could be available, made available, sitting idle. So I start to think about, for a lot of these hosting companies, how much compute power is just sitting there not being used that could be used for some of these projects in the region. So that's just a different angle on it. I mean, certainly from our standpoint, that's something we'd be very supportive of. But yeah, I think for other companies too.
We have another question? Yes, we do. We've got one here, and then Randy next over in the middle.
So I have nothing against altruistic projects. I think they need to be done. But I will never be convinced that if you build it, they will come. So what's the intentional engagement and outcome from this? Well, let me rephrase that. I know what you want for an outcome, but how are you engaging people to get that outcome?
That's really the challenge, isn't it? Yep. I'm not sure. I mean, it's... I think one of the best things I've heard is Bert Rutan's TED Talk, when he talks about inspiring the youth and really capturing their imagination between the sense of age between 10 and 14. And that's really the goal for us, is to provide that inspiration. It's really simple as that. I'm not sure how we engage them or how we haven't quite got that far yet, but hopefully we build it and they will come.
Bruce.
Thanks. Bruce MacArthur with Tessera Systems. I really enjoyed the speakers. This one's for you, Stephen, and specifically I'm wondering about how, or some examples perhaps, of how people, software as a service companies, are using your tools to move up the value chain. So you certainly provided us with a view into all the different metrics and analytics that are being done. Just like big data, we can sometimes get overloaded as companies with big analytics and so many metrics that you wonder how do you use that in your day-to-day operations to become more profitable, strategically align your resources, and just some observations perhaps on those metrics, those things that you feel companies that are really trying to move up the value chain, move up in terms of creating more market space and exploiting their opportunities to the max. So.
Yeah, so up the value chain in terms of adjacent products to their existing customer base, or up the value chain in terms of users paying for more things, whatever that value chain looks like, the bigger opportunity. Well, the first journey that a company goes on is understanding they need to have data, and then they figure out what data we need to look at. Cashew's interesting. The last time I was out in Vancouver, which was about 3 weeks ago, they have now taken that funnel and they've put it on a monitor on the wall, and so they have those metrics actually available to everybody in their whole office on a moment's notice. So everyone's starting to sort of live and breathe these metrics, which is how many people do we have on our site today, how many people did we close today, and all of it feeds back from their pro forma forecast. So they want X number of users at the end of the year, so on a mathematical basis you just work backwards and say, okay, well that means that this lever has to, this conversion rate has to be here and this number has to be here. In terms of moving up value chain, in a SaaS company, I think of it as the SaaS tiers, and we've all seen this on cloud-based software where there's 4 tiers. This one's $9 a month, and $19 a month, $39 and $99. And there's the one that's highlighted that says best value, which typically means best value for the company, by the way. That's all good. Most popular. But to move up that value chain, it really is about understanding what that customer needs in the scope of their world related to your company that they will pay more money for, and understanding what's in those paywalls. When we call those paywalls between the SaaS tiers, a very obvious one is going from a free tier to the first tier. I always use corporate branding. So in the lowest tier, for example, Cashew, when reports print out, there's a little report by Cashew on the bottom of it, or if they send an invoice. And if they start paying, then that branding gets removed and they can put their own branding on. So those are very, very subtle little behavioral things that customers go through, but people will pay for those things. And I think the thing I love about this is that in the end, it's not about shoving features down a customer's throat and saying, hey, by the way, we've raised our prices by 20% again this year, suck it up. It's about saying, wow, customers really want this stuff, and if we make it for them, they're going to pay. They're actually going to then thank us for this and feel good and have a relationship with this company. Apple, of course, has been the best example of this type of thing, although they've stumbled a little bit on the iPhone 5 with their maps and whatnot. But I'm sure they'll be fine. But that's ultimately, I think, the goal of any company, is to make my customers so passionate and evangelistic about my products because I'm giving them such great services and I understand who they are, that they're willing to part with their cash. And it's hard to get people to say. And it's funny, I find the mobile app world fascinating because I was CEO of Mob for Hire for 2 years. Mob for Hire, by the way, is a community of 60,000 people in about 150 countries on 444 different wireless carriers that can test apps and do other things in market, SMS testing and such. And it's fascinating to watch mobile users, post on iTunes. I paid 99 cents for this app. It's not worth it. What a piece of crap. And it's like, but it's 99 cents. So what a person receives in the value chain versus what they're asking for, as long as you match those two things up, you can take customers anywhere, I think. So, but it is about understanding the data, though, for sure. Because you can slip up a lot. Thanks.
Brad, what I find very interesting about a session like this, when you have minds in the room, we're talking about telescopes on First Nations reserves. First of all, I think telescopes should be out there and available to everybody if we are promoting science. Secondly, with what's going on in Mars right now, what's going on with the rover, the information sending back with the possibility of water, and so on and so forth, has captured the imagination of a lot of people. This would be an extremely appropriate time to do something like that. And the question of commercialization that comes up, everything starts with a seed, with the idea, and it grows from there. Just the way we are, if there's a way to make money, that's going to happen. That's where the commercialization comes in. But a lot of times they want that idea to be developed outside that realm. This is a golden opportunity in science because of what other people are doing right now. But just one of the suggestions that was made in the room about the connecting all of them and providing something even bigger and something better, all starts with a presentation, with ideas from the room that will lead to that inevitability of commercialization. Somebody will make $1. But it's all those young people that have the opportunity to look at something just a little more than the stars, to open their imagination, and then all of a sudden put them on a different path in life, which will lead them to a career in science, which I think is a wonderful opportunity.
Randy, we've got 2 more folks waving away at you at the back there. I think we've got about a couple more minutes. I'm looking over to Keely or Marianne for our wrap-up time.
Nathan from the Canadian Space Society. Question of making money on this stuff. I see the connection between First Nations and their connection to the environment, and tracking and monitoring space debris could be a potential service that could be provided. Just a thought.
Thanks.
Thank you for bringing that up, Jimmy. And something else as well that has come to light is that once this connectivity is in place, obviously there's a million other things that can benefit from it as well. One of the big movements around the world is called Water Keepers, and it's a private group of individuals doing private water monitoring in watersheds. And there's really not a lot of this happening in Canada. And that's just one example. If once we have this connectivity, we can really rock and roll with all this stuff. You know, it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of it. But laying the groundwork to connect it all is the first thing. And that's why James is such a champion for us all.
Although I do like the notion of the space debris thing, is reserves low light pollution and good sky use.
I just learned about an app today called Card Munch. I don't know if anybody's heard of Card Munch, but you take a photo of a business card, it ships an image of the card off to India where somebody transcribes the content from the card, sends back the completed V-card for you. Why couldn't we do that from any community, right? That's an economic development opportunity for any community on the face of the planet, but they're really, really infinite opportunities, I think. And when it comes to this whole altruistic versus commercial kind of thing, the economic case for doing what I think everybody's really kind of getting at here is huge. The economic case for it. We will find the business case, and I think that's the point you're trying to make, Mr. Mayor, is that, yeah, as long as we're committed to realizing that economic opportunity, the business case will emerge. We'll figure it out.
So actually, this is stupid. I promise not to trip you up. So I'd like to think.
Work together, by the way. Yeah.
So I'd like to think that Intuit created the over-surveying people. I'd like to think they're the originators of that. So every website you go to asks you to do a survey. How do you deal with the incomplete information of people that don't want to respond to a survey in terms of collecting your data?
Well, I'll attack that for the over-survey side first. All this pop-up stuff that we get on every single little thing is absolutely insane, right? Again, that's creating transactional trend analysis, and I think you can get at the data a lot of different ways. Most call centers have more than enough data that you can capture what's going on in a customer's mind in terms of ongoing transactions with your company. And we really struggle when we do surveys for customers. You know, we'll sit in a room full of the CMO and COO and stuff. And well, we need to ask this and this. I don't think we're going to see any statistical variance on that. I don't think we're going to. And so we continue to knock questions out of it. So there is an over-surveying thing for sure. What was the second part of your question?
Just in terms of, because, you know, in terms of being able to gather data, you're going to have a lot of incomplete data. You're going to have a very large customer set, but it's a subset that responds to the truly representative.
Right. Right, so is the, you don't always get the most complete data set. You get some people that want to fill it out because they're either really, really happy or really, really angry. But we look at, again, we look at statistical variance. If we get a data set that's large enough that we know that things aren't shifting around, we know it's probably 95%, 99% accurate for us. We'll take incomplete data, incompletes is what we call them. We'll take that data and use it in the data set. But we find, even at Cashew, we had 7% response out of the customer base, and there was more than enough data there to prove to us that, we know that this is what the customer base as a whole is thinking about. If you're getting down into numbers like you're going to do a survey and it's got 110 respondents, and then you have to question the statistical variance. But when it's in the thousands, yeah, the data's solid. Luke.
Two questions for Robert. Does the high cost of bandwidth in Canada affect your ability to compete with Americans? And second question, what's your take on open transit exchanges?
So yeah, I think I've noticed that change over probably the last 8 to 10 years, because I think there's been a flattening of the pricing model for bandwidth, but it was an inhibitor for sure for Canada to build big applications and big access to the internet. I mean, sorry, the second part was?
Your opinion on open transit exchanges.
I'm very for that personally. I think we certainly, we're a member of many of the peering points and Torex and others, and I think it's an important part of the whole internet philosophy in terms of sharing traffic, and certainly on our networks we share traffic with others, so I'm very for that because I think it creates an enriched, and we really want the internet to be ubiquitous wherever you are. You have access, and there's no, okay, I'm on this network, therefore I can't get as good routing to this end user. So we're very supportive of that and believe in it. I'm not sure everyone else does, but it's because some people try and make money out of transit and sharing traffic. So, but I think in terms of the first part of your question, I think that's flattened. And again, we talked about this earlier this morning. I think in this, you have great fiber, and the connectivity you have in this province is a great opportunity for to take advantage of some of this data and data analysis, hosting, and connecting these various projects together. And that's a real opportunity and an asset that could be leveraged for sure.
I'm going to jump in with one of my questions again. Whether it's Nathan wanting to make wealth with data rather than money with data, and by the way, I really like that. I tweeted that while you were talking. I probably had the advantage this time as a moderator of sitting up there and tweeting away. I'm told when I was tweeting away at the first session, some folks thought I was not listening and somehow distracted on my phone. Check the Twitter feed, it's all there. Whether it's the altruistic side, whether it's monitoring all the data, or whether it's actually generating the data from the big data centers that are so often hidden that we don't see. How many of us think of what data centers there are churning away when we just Google something? It's all hidden and magic. Ultimately, you've got to have the connectivity. Before you can enable people with all these tools, you've got to have the connectivity. And Brad this morning, when asked about legislation, said that he didn't really favor legislation. He'd rather get people to work together and not take things over. In Canada, we have a very low population density, about 3 people per square kilometre, as opposed to, say, 7,000 in Singapore. And so I've often argued that facilities-based competition doesn't make sense. There's a picture that floats around here every now and again of me standing that James Manloon took with my hands on 4 or 5 major fibre trunks all running parallel to each other. In Australia, when the Australian government wanted to do the national broadband network, they were basically unable to get the deal that they wanted from their national telcos. And they said, enough, we can't negotiate this, we're not going to legislate it, so we'll build our own right alongside yours, and yours values is going to drop a lot when we put our national broadband network in. And suddenly people started getting on board. But they had to do that. They had to be prepared to actually go and put fibre in the ground alongside the carriers who were holding on to artificially high rates. What's your thoughts on the best way to level the playing field and get us back down to those US rates rather than the much, much higher Canadian rates? I'll give you a couple of choices to make it easier. Legislation or building in parallel. Or something else you think of. Who wants to take it first?
I'll have it go.
Yeah, it's expensive to be a Canadian mobile user for sure. But I think ultimately connection to Wi-Fi. I mean, again, when I do all my business globally, I use Skype for that stuff. We use Fuse for teleconferencing, and all, even my phone calls to landlines are done through Skype, and so which I pay cents on a minute to versus if I was used to use the phone company. So I think Wi-Fi is, and especially if it's publicly available Wi-Fi, is basically the answer to high rates on phone systems. Anyway, I don't think we're going to go away in Canada from high rates because we do have to service very small rural areas, and that's subsidized by the usage in the big areas. But for me personally, as you know, if I'm in a place with a Wi-Fi with my phone, I rarely ever use the connectivity through the 3G. It's usually through Wi-Fi. So I'm trying to take care of that on my own.
You are relying on somebody who built that Wi-Fi for you.
Oh yes, we're definitely relying. I'm going to move to Fredericton probably. I lived in Ormoc for a while, or in Nova Scotia, so yeah. But there you are.
So I think as someone who is considering building a data center in the province, obviously fiber connectivity is key, and it could be the difference between us not building here and building here. I mean, it's as simple as that, because it's a key part of our infrastructure. So I'm not sure how to achieve it. I'm probably more in favour of some type of legislation that, or some kind of economic support program that, for businesses who want to get access to that. I think the economic benefit from freeing the access up to that bandwidth would far outweigh the cost, the cost of the bandwidth. I mean, the real upside is in the business you build around the bandwidth, not just the bandwidth itself. So I'm just trying to think how to get there, but there may be some kind of starter program where you can give bandwidth to companies as they build, or some other model. But I think giving access to people, I think, will build these applications, and that enables us to process all the big data that we have. And there's got to be some way of doing that that makes it much easier to do and achieve.
So, is there not, correct me if I'm wrong, in Alberta broadband network for education that's adjudicated by Cyber or is connected somehow?
Yes.
There are like millions of bits of bandwidth that's just sitting there for companies to take advantage of it.
Stephen just said, isn't the Alberta SuperNet great?
I think it is, but unlike where there was actually existing infrastructure for federal to take advantage of, I think SuperNet's there for me.
But how much, I'm learning for the region, but how much does it cost them is the key thing.
Our visitors are asking, and I'll just answer their question in a nice little reversal, and then we'll wrap it up and have some lunch. The government of Alberta did something really clever and visionary. Between 2000 and 2005, they invested $300 million in wiring every community in this province that had a library, a school, a government office, or a healthcare facility at a cost of $300 million. And that's a really awesome resource. And many of us feel that it's not being used to its full potential. It's great, but it could be a lot greater. And many of the things coming out of this conference, whether it's the examples from Fredericton, the building of data centers, the ability to really measure how we can make money out of it, or the altruism that pops from it, is something that can all be derived from some amazing advantages we have in this province, and we hope to capitalize on those. With that, I'd like to thank our speakers. For any of you who have actually run up to Vistas for lunch, bad news, the lunch is right down here. Just outside.
Back in here at 1:30 to the final session.
Back in here at 1:30 for the final session.